Welcome to the FOH Masterclass hosted by Kenny Gargett.
And John.
And John. No, John, you don't. No, he wants to take no responsibility for this train wreck. I can tell you. He knows. He knows what's good for him. Kenny, the masterclass is about understanding champagne and understanding the champagne, how it actually. I think it's one of the great combinations with cigars. But there's different types of champagne. So first we're going to see what everyone's brought very, very quickly. What are you drinking? What are you smoking? Start with you, Johnny.
Hello, everyone. My name's John. I have a bottle of GH Mum, which is the third biggest seller in my country, Australia, behind Moet, Moet Chandon and Veuve Clicquot. So yeah, I've got in my.
Can I just intrude very briefly?
Please do.
Before we actually started recording, we were talking about pronunciation, and John had lots of interesting things, but it's actually Moet, not Moet, because he was Dutch.
Sure.
Lord Moet.
Okay. For foreign
There we
names,
have it, people. There we have it. The first time Ken's ever picked someone else up on pronunciation.
I'll pick you up enough.
History of mankind.
Moet
He still calls Ramon Iones High Malones. It is appalling. But anyway, it's good. Chris, what are you drinking? What are you smoking?
I have brought a Lanson white label Sec. It's a sweeter style champagne. It's not sweeter than the Brut, but I find it a lot more enjoyable compared when smoking with cigars. And I am smoking a Paul Larrañaga Robusto. I haven't smoked one of these in years.
Sorry, did we get what John was smoking?
No, we didn't.
I'm smoking a Hoyo de Montre La Hoyo de San Juan. That's what I'm smoking.
Beautiful cigar. Lovely.
Beautiful.
For those who are using the handles, I'll use your handle on this because no doubt you're being sought by police somewhere. Charles, you're not using your handle. What are you smoking? What are you drinking?
I'm smoking this Toro, first cigar in 2.5 months after major dental work. I'm not supposed to be smoking this, but whatever. And I'm drinking whatever that is.
Piper Heidsieck.
Very good, Piper. I like Piper. I love Piper. It's good. Mate, lovely to see you pulled a Coro for today. Nice work. Lovely seat. Excellent. Never know.
Yes, sir. After that Esplendito article the other day, I got a BST December 20.
Oh, nice work.
It's
nice work.
I figured if we're having a meeting with the great King Gargett, I'm breaking out a good cigar.
Just make sure you keep it away from Rob. He'll steal it.
I saw that. Tattinger.
What are you drinking? Tattinger.
Tattinger. I'm going to murder this one. Brut Millésime 2016.
Beautiful. Nice work. Mm-hmm. Harrison, what are you bringing to the table?
Today I am smoking an N9 Lonsdale that is absolutely fantastic right now. I could not be more pleased with it. And to double down on my ass kissing, I have brought Ayala.
Oh, wow. You know what? I was going to do that. I was going to drink an Ayala champagne, but I didn't want to be pretentious.
You were going to kiss your own ass? How's that work?
Yeah. I love the Blanc, the Ayala champagne. I love some of their champagnes. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. What drinking and smoking? Eating.
Sorry, me. Sorry. Hi guys, I'm Luca. You can hear me okay? All good? I'm having the Billy Cart Salmon Le Blanc. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. John,
can you pronounce that, Ken?
I refer to John.
Bill Casamo.
Got someone.
We got some more. Very good.
So
Mike
haven't had
Morgan,
this
what are you
before.
drinking and smoking?
My wife and I are enjoying Veuve Clicquot Brut 2015. I have a backup just in depending on how this evening goes of a Moet Chandon Brut Imperial, and then I'm smoking La Trova.
So just so I'm right, you brought a second bottle of champagne, right? This is
Just
why I
in
like
case.
it so much.
Rob,
I
I
like
was a Boy Scout. Always got to be prepared.
Yeah, that's great. Just in case.
Just
That's
in
good.
case.
Brett, what are you drinking and smoking?
So I'm smoking a Siglo 5, and to drink, I'm having a 2008. I can't see myself, so hopefully you guys can see it. 2008 vintage rosé. Like a lot of 2008s when this was released, it was too acidic, so I decided to put it away and forget about it, and I probably did too good a job. So,
Which producer, sorry?
what was that?
Which producer?
This is Veuve Clicquot.
Mm-hmm.
So looking forward to trying this. It's been about 5 years since I had it.
Nice work. Chris.
Hey,
Tennessee, what are
Rob,
you
I'm
smoking?
I'm having some technical difficulties, but I'm just getting set up. I have
I'll leave you to it. Let me know.
okay, yeah, but I could let you know what I got. I'm set up tonight with. I have a Romeo and Juliet Bellicoso. I got maybe 4 or 5 years of age, and it looks really oily, and I'm looking forward to smoking it. It's been winter here, and I haven't been smoking as frequently, so I'm really excited about that. And then I did go with my go-to champagne is that Veuve Coquet, but I've always wanted to try this Bollinger. So I do have a bottle of Bollinger that I'm about to pop.
Very nice. Very nice. Kenny, what are you smoking and drinking?
Smoking a Punch Super Selection 2 from 2002 and Champagne Henriot, or however John pronounces it, Blanc de Blanc.
Very nice. And I'm having the new Bon Roberts Phenomenos. That's a decent sized cigar, 54 ring gauge by 7 3/4 inches. I think that'll do it for the day. And my favorite everyday champagne, which is just a straight Paul Roger. Just a straight NB Paul Roger, which I love on a Sunday morning. It is Sunday morning here, and I didn't see any reason to change it up. But just a beautiful cigar. Beautiful cigar. Beautiful bottle of wine. First question, Kenny. Be honest with us. How many champagne producers would faint if they saw cigars being smoked with champagne?
They're French. They smoke like chimneys. Wouldn't bother them. Well, look, quite a few people have got Verve, and let's see who else. Just trying to work out. Didier Mariotti. We did a video with him on your deck some years ago. He was the chef de cave of Verve at the time. He smokes like a chimney, and he joined us for a little cigar. He's now
D4, if I remember correctly.
Sorry.
He joined us for a D4. It was a part of his Series D4.
Yep, he was with Mum, and he's now making Verve. So he's just one, but there's plenty of them that there are a few women taking over the roles of champagne makers. Maybe they'd be a little less excited, but in general, the French tend to be fairly more relaxed about these sort of things than a lot of us.
Can you go through the different, without going through the different styles of champagne, because we'll delve into that a little bit later. But is there any style of champagne which really does lend itself to cigars and some that don't?
Well, you got the problem there is there's such a range of cigars. It's like there's no one size fits all in a sense, and some will work better with others. So you've got think of all the different cigars that we all know, and then with champagnes, you've got non-vintage, you've got vintage, you've got rosé, you've got prestige, You've got different levels of sweetness. You've got different levels of the things staying on lees. You've got the Blanc de Blanc stuff. I mean, I love Blanc de Blanc, which is 100% Chardonnay. The Blanc de Noir will be made from either Pinot Noir or Meunier or a combination of both. They tend to be a richer sort of a style. Houses like Bollinger and Poll and some of the others, Krug and that, do use a lot of those grapes, and they make absolutely stunning champagnes. And I think those work very well. Maybe the Blanc de Blanc doesn't go quite so well if you've got a big, rich cigar. But in that case, there's plenty of the houses like Bollinger and Poll and so on. I'm not sure that helps too much, but
Sorry,
No,
Ken.
it's good.
Sorry, Ken. Just a quick question there. You just stated about Blanc de Blanc. It was also made with Pinot Meunier. Is it? I thought it was
Blanc de
purely
Noir is
Chardonnay.
Meunier. Blanc de Blanc is 100% Chardonnay.
Yep.
And Blanc de Noir is a combination or solo Pinot Noir or Meunier. They've actually dropped the Pinot now a lot of the time, just have the Meunier. And it can be either or both. And of course, normal champagne, when I say normal, it's just the blend is a combination of Chardonnay, Pinot Meunier, or two of those three.
I must have misheard. Sorry.
Right? That's why we're recording it.
He can make mistakes too, Chris.
Endlessly.
Bonus box of cigars for anyone who actually picks up a mistake that Ken's made. But
Can I be in that as well?
No, you can't, and you can't set it up.
It's just not fair. It's just not fair.
Kenny, there are so many great champagnes, but in the non-vintage world of champagne, what defines a non-vintage champagne to begin with? Because I think that's 90% of what people are drinking most of the time, yeah? And if you were to get, so two questions here. What defines a non-vintage champagne? Secondly, if you had to pick one non-vintage champagne at the local store for yourself, assuming you're buying one, which is very rare, but let's assume you did.
I buy lots.
No, you don't, mate. You get gifted them. They send them to you to review. You get gifted them.
Sadly,
you
not a
had
lot of
to spend-
champagne gets sent
You
my
had
way.
to spend your own coin. For your palate, what would you buy? Where do you think the top one or two of the non-vintage champagnes are? But let's go back first as to what defines a non-vintage.
Well, the reason we have non-vintage champagne goes back to when they started making champagne. Back in those days, the climate weather was a lot. It wasn't quite as warm as we have today, and they used to talk about in a decade you'd hope to get 3 decent vintages. Now, if you're only producing vintage wine and you're only doing it 3 times a decade, you're really not going to make a lot of money. And so they worked out by keeping reserves from other vintages they could blend. And then they came up with this concept of house style. So the idea is that, say, Bollinger or Moet or whoever, they make a house style. And if you buy that wine, you should be getting exactly the same wine if you buy it in Brisbane or Brazil or Belarus, wherever. If you're buying a non-vintage Moet, it'll taste the same. That's the concept. In recent years, they've started to acknowledge that, well, that's not strict. I mean, it's never going to be strictly accurate. They'll certainly be house DNA. They'll be very similar. But we're starting to see numbers put on wine. Jacqueson started this, really. Krug have adopted it, and others are doing the same thing, where there's an acknowledgement that even though it's Krug Grand Cuvée, which is their non-vintage, it is number 168. They went back and worked out how many wines they've made over the years, and so it is causing a little bit of consternation in a sense because, for example, everyone wanted the Krug Grand Cuvée, which had 08 as its base because 08 was such a brilliant year. And 11 comes along, no one wants that, except for the fact that the wines are so close to each other that good luck telling them apart. So that's what's happened with non-vintages. We've seen the emergence of growers in recent years, the grower champagne. A lot of those are vintage simply because, well, they've only got one vineyard and they really don't have the resources to be doing. Otherwise, they've got to put them out each year. But some do. And so we're seeing some who are doing non-vintage. And that's, for example, one of my all-time favourite producers is a guy called Olivier Colin from Ulysses Colin. He doesn't make vintage champagne at all. I mean, his first was because he only had the one vintage to put into it, but he's never called it vintage. He always tries to blend something in there. So that's what we're seeing with non-vintage now. If I had to buy one, well, it depends on all sorts of things. I mean, as I said, I love Ulysses Colin. I used to buy those when our American friends might be more familiar with Matt Kramer, the wine writer, than some. He used to write in Wine Spectator for many years. Matt was not a fan of champagne, but he loved Ulysses Colin. He sent me an email and said, "You got to find these guys." And it just happened that same day, the first shipment arrived in Australia. And so I used to buy Ulysses Colin at 60 or 70 bucks a bottle, and I could get a couple of cases. Now, my allocation is one, maybe two bottles, and they're about 500 a bottle. So it's unfortunate.
I have a question about that, Ken. In the United States, he seems to have decided to focus on distributing his wines through restaurants entirely. So they're almost impossible to find at retail at any price here.
Yep.
Is he doing the same thing in Australia? And I'm kind of curious your thoughts about that strategy.
Look, he makes so little wine, and he's got such a following now. And I mean, that's not solely my fault, but I used to write about him when no one else was doing it. And now I can't get the frickin' wines. If I'd known that, I'd stayed shut up. But I mean, certainly that's happening around the world. He has got a great following because he makes wonderful, wonderful champagnes. He's changed importers here, which is a shame in a way, because the guy who now brings him in does not mind hiking prices even more. And he does sell a lot to restaurants. He will allow a little to go out to his good customers, and I'm very grateful to him because they let me buy a bottle or two now. Just breaks my heart every year when I see the thing come around, and I think, God, I used to buy cases of this. Anyway, so yes, it's fairly similar here. And of course, then there's the problem of the markup in restaurants, which hike the price even further.
That's I think what has, I guess, upset some people about it, that not only have his wines gotten extremely expensive, but you're going to pay 2 or 3 times that markup at a restaurant. They're very, very hard to find. I mean, I know he makes very little wine, but your best bet is getting them at a restaurant at over $1,000 a pop, probably most of them.
Yep, that's the sad reality of those sort of champagnes.
Look, Kenny, for your budget, okay, you've got to go and search that one out, and you've never shared that champagne with me, like, ever. But so from a budget.
Well, I'll put the bottle that was coming up on Friday back in the cellar then, shall I?
You're bringing it on Friday. Excellent.
Can.
Excellent. So for the budget envision,
be nice.
I am very nice. They're out there. 2 points. What are your favourites among them? And secondly, I've heard you mention to me before that different winemakers will change houses. They'll move from one house to the other, and you'll say, I remember you telling me once that Moet really has improved. It really has improved. Mumm had the same improvement for a period of time there. Yep. And so changing your winemaker, even in a champagne environment, really does change it, yeah?
Look, Moet's a great example. Benoit Goez, and forgive the French pronunciation, that's about as close as I'm going to get. Benoit took over probably 25 years ago. He was quite young. He was clearly a really talented winemaker, but to be put in charge of Moet, which makes such a massive amount of wine, was a huge, huge statement. And he's clever enough to know that if he immediately went to what he wanted to achieve, basically sales would plummet and he'd be sacked. He needed to do it very gradually, just a fraction each year. And so things like the dosage has been lowered. That's the level of sweetness ever so slightly. Time on lees changed, and the material going into it. All of these things he's had to do very, very slowly because people know. I mean, and it's all very well saying, "Oh, the ladies who lunch just go down and buy Moet because of the name or something like that." They're familiar with the taste, and if suddenly they're buying it and it's completely different, they're going to be going, "Well, this is not my Moet." So he had to do it very gradually, and he has improved it over the last decade or two. It's a very good non-vintage champagne, and the vintages are also excellent. Mumm, Didier did the same thing with Mumm. Now, what's his name? Dominic. It'll come to me. He does. He was doing Verve. He's now off with. Oh God, I can see the freaking label. Anyway, it'll come to me. And these guys do this. Not all. There was a feeling that Didier was moved on from Mumm because basically he was doing the same thing. These slow increases in quality in that, but it's also can mean increases in cost. And the powers that be that Mumm just decided, bugger this, we're more interested in just selling vast volumes as cheaply as we can, so we really don't need you. So he got the flick, and Veuve Clicquot was clever enough to immediately grab hold of him. If Verve's picking you up, you've got to have some talent. But yeah, so
back to your non-vintage champagnes.
Mm-hmm.
When you go BWS or Dan Murphy's or a retail operation, you need to pick up 2 bottles. What are you picking up in the non-vintage?
Well, I'm having a look to see what they've got and what they've got on special because freaking thing. It can change, and I mean, if something's $20 or $30 cheaper than it normally is, it's why wouldn't you? But in general, I mean, look, Bollinger's very good, but it's not cheap. Pol is certainly has always been an exceptional non-vintage. As you say, it's your Sunday morning drink. It's always been exceptional, and I'm going back decades now. As we said, Moet's improved a lot. Verve, I find Verve doesn't hurt putting away in the cellar for a little while. You don't have to actually buy it and drink it immediately. But there are so many good ones around.
Actually, that's a question I got for you. So you can actually age NV, non-vintage champagne.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't know that.
Some more than others. Look, the French tell you no when it's ready for drinking when we release it, but that's because they want to sell you another bottle. And if you're actually buying it and stocking up, it's not quite what they're after.
Ken, would you say that do you feel like you could confidently say that any non-vintage champagne you buy, unless it's real well stuff, will improve for at least a year after release? Now, that's after release, not necessarily when you buy it, but how would you feel about that statement?
Look, I think if you've got a good cellar, a year, putting a non-vintage in your cellar for a year is not a problem at all. It'll be fine. 3 or 4. There is some. I mean, you could say someone's got a Piper Heidsieck I saw. Now that tended to be thought of as a buy and drink quickly, but for many years they didn't do malolactic fermentation, which is a way of sort of softening the acidity in the wines. And there's a few that don't. Lanson's another that doesn't. Those champagnes age for so long. But Piper was putting it out there as a sort of the nightclub champagne, buy it, guzzle it. We don't care, just buy another one. But in fact, their wines could last for a very long time.
Ken, you mentioned something interesting. You said if you have it in a nice cellar. If you don't have a proper cellar, what would be the best way to age a non-vintage bottle, like what you're describing right now? Temperature, like darkness. Are we sticking it in a cooler? What's the best way to age
Look,
non-vintage?
it's no different from any other wine, really, and that's you want a consistent temperature. If it's a little higher than ideal, it's better to be that and consistent rather than to be low, high sort of thing. I hear people tell me, "Oh, but winter we're 8 degrees in the cellar. It's fantastic. Summer, yeah, it gets up and down. That stuffs up wine more than being slightly higher. You want to be trying to cellar somewhere between, 10, 12 up to 16, maybe even 17. Light, you do not want the wines exposed to light, so keep them in their box or keep them in a dark cellar. You'll have seen Cristal, for example, which is a clear bottle, but it's got that yellow cellophane. That yellow cellophane is around it to stop UV light. And so if you see a bottle of Cristal in the store and it hasn't got that yellow cellophane, don't buy it, because every chance it's light struck. And that sort of gives it funky characters and so forth. You don't want movement and so forth. So, if you live next to a train track, perhaps move your cellar elsewhere. But that's the same for all wines. And if you don't have professional cellaring, find someone who does. And
That'd be me.
Buy a wine fridge. The wine fridges that they have that you can put there. They'll work. People say, "Oh, you don't want to leave the wine in for years," and that's probably true because they're quite low in temperature, and there's a theory that maybe that'll shrink the cork and allow air in and out. It's possible, but gee, that's better. If you don't have air conditioning or refrigerated cellar at home, and you don't have a wine fridge, there'll be plenty of places around where you can use professional cellaring. And sure, it costs you a little bit of money, but it's better than having stuffed wine. So, put it over there, and also it stops you when you're pissed at 3 a.m, going in and drinking your really good stuff.
Ken, how about passive cellars? Like if it's relatively stable over a day or week, but there's a seasonal change of, maybe 8 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, gradually over time. I mean, is that still okay? You won't get as much aging, I'm sure, but
Look, it's not perfect for sure. It's better than if it was worse, if you know what I mean. But if you can avoid it, and the other thing is, people think, oh yeah, look, it's just a little bit of change over the seasons. You can buy sort of thermometer gauge things that record, and people who've done that have been shocked at how much there is actual change where they didn't really think there was. Because you don't really notice it yourself so much. I mean, sure, you notice summer's hotter, but in these, you think of it more as gradual. It's often a lot less gradual than people think.
I think it makes a big difference, at least in my experience, if your basement is below grade, if it's underground, and you don't run the heat down there or something like that, which can change the air temperature. If you don't have a below grade part of your house, you're definitely going to get, I think you're absolutely right, big temperature swings.
Just one thing. Interestingly enough, Luca just reminded me of something. I actually had a non-vintage Moet and Chandon last week that was not stored in any ideal conditions whatsoever. It was just stored in the house. A friend of a friend had bought it back in 2014 and given it to our mate Cam to bring last week, and we cracked it open. It was it lost a lot of its freshness, but it was actually still quite an enjoyable champagne. And for somebody who had not stored it well, it was just kept on a shelf in a fairly dark environment, and relatively cool, but it was just kept on a shelf. And popped it open last week, perfectly fine.
These things are generalizations, Fuzz, and you can get lucky or you can get unlucky as well with better conditions than that. The other thing is, people have got this this assumption that wines have to be, have to go down to your cellar once a month and turn all your wines. You don't be doing that. That actually comes from Champagne when they're about to disgorge the wines. Now they have machines for most places, but some places still use humans that go down and they do this, and it's done to get the muck out of the bottle. I can go through the process if you want it, but it's basically, that's why they do this. And people see that and think, oh, I must turn my wines. Don't leave them. Just leave them untouched for as long as you can.
Might just take a quick break there and let Kenny catch his breath.
I'm fine.
And
can I ask a question?
please.
Can we zip around and just ask everyone how they find the match of their chosen champagne and chosen cigar? Is it working? Is it not working? Etc. Can we do that?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. Well, who do we start with? Fuzz, we start with you.
Yep. Okay. Going back to me. Well, just remind everyone, I'm drinking the Lanson white label sec. It is a sweeter style of champagne, sweeter than Brut. The Paul Larrañaga. I find it's a fantastic match, to be honest. The sweetness helps with a bit of the dryness of the cigar. Yeah, it's a lovely pairing, to be honest. It's fantastic. I love the got a bit of fruitiness with the champagne. It's fantastic.
I've got the Paul Roger, just NV, the Reserve NV, but they're all called Reserve. What I love about it, I'm just doing the Phenomenos, which you guys will have access to in the next couple of weeks. The champagne, for me, one of the reasons I love Paul is that pear and apple. I love that pear and apple nature to it. And I think that, and it's not a sweet champagne, but it's certainly, it's fruity. And that fruitiness goes so well with a light medium-bodied Cuban cigar or light medium-bodied non-Cuban cigar. There is no tannins in the cigar. No tannins. There's no hit. There's no elbows in this cigar at all. It's all, again, it's brioche and cream, and that just sort of works well together with the champagne itself. I think champagne and cigars is one of the great pairings. I don't think it gets too much better than that. Last time around we did Riesling, and I think you guys were exceptionally surprised how good Riesling goes, and there's so many different types of Riesling. Champagne and cigars for me is something special. It's a Sunday morning treat, but I do it most Sunday mornings.
You do it most mornings, but go on.
No, I make the best espresso martini, kid, and I got into a habit of having an espresso martini in the mornings with a cigar, and that was great. But I had to stop because it got too out of hand. And before espresso martinis, it was Negronis. So Mike Morgan, yeah. I'll have anything in the morning for the cigar. True, but Sundays, perfect champagne. John, over to you.
I tend to favor my palate more lighter or citrus type champagnes. So I like Paul Roger, Lanson, Tanger, Maume. I find it hard to get onto those heavier champagnes with a cigar like Bollinger. I can still drink it. It's okay. Look, any Cuban cigar goes. It's the champagne that matters to me. Any Cuban cigar will fit with the champagne because Cuban cigars are lighter in general. One final note I wanted to add. I know that Ken will talk more about this. In Australia, we have a huge preference for the Brut, the dry champagne. We don't tend to go for the more sweeter sec or rosé. But Fuzz there and Luca, our group of friends here in Sydney, we don't mind any of them. I like a rosé too. I don't find it a coincidence that Brett, being American, has a rosé because they're the biggest consumers of rosé outside of France, I think, from what I remember, by far. But here in Australia, it's not a thing. But anyway, look, we could go on about different types of champagnes. I'm sure you will, Ken. But that's
I've
my
got a
pick.
question there, but we'll continue on this thread first. Charles, how do you find the pairing?
As I mentioned before, this is the first cigar I've had in 2.5 months. So I could really be drinking Mad Dog 2020 and be extremely pleased. I don't know enough about champagne to know if this is good, bad, sweet, dry. It seems to be dry and not too sweet, which is kind of my profile across the board. So it's working well.
Welcome, Will. Never know. Let us know your thoughts.
This I'm saying this wrong. I'm obviously learning. The Tatin J. It with this Cohiba, it's perfect. With a lighter cigar like this, the flavors and everything come together. When I go to more like something like a punch or a Partagas, that's when my bourbon taste kick in. If it makes sense. The stronger cigar with the stronger drink. But the champagne in this
That's
Cohiba
absolutely
perfect.
makes absolute sense. Tattinger is considered one of the lighter styles of champagne. So what you're saying is exactly what you'd expect. It's perfect.
I actually bought 3 bottles. I've got a Rotorare and a Melee. I believe that's how you say it. Right.
Which is the other one?
Several, just in case. But yeah, this combination's awesome. I'll be picking some more of this up.
Good stuff. Harrison?
Pardon me, my headphones crapped out, but I'm enjoying N9 Lonsdale with Ayala, and I think it's going incredibly well. I've never had this champagne before. Nice medium-bodied cigar. And this is like on the, I'd say, a touch below medium for champagne. And I'm enjoying, it's like a kind of citrusy, little green apple thing, but still kind of it's a nice minerality, robustness to it. I think they're pairing perfectly. I could not be more pleased.
Excellent. Excellent. Luca?
What you say, sorry, just very briefly, Ayala is now owned by the House of Bollinger, or has been for a decade or more, and they wanted something opposite to their style of rich, full, and so they went with Ayala, which is much more lighter, citrusy, as you say, Chardonnay-based style. So that's exactly along the lines you're talking.
Luca?
I'm having the Blanc de Blanc Debilicat Salmon, and I've paired it with the EL Ramon Iones Absolutos. And I find this cigar is probably mild medium, more on the medium end, and it's a good pairing. But unfortunately, I can't say too much because apart from that, in terms of the body, because it's got that fireproof wrapper. It reminds me of the Talismans when they came out. You just couldn't keep the wrapper
Can't keep
going.
it lit.
Yeah. So, but the body and the flavors just right. I think Ken, you said with Blanc de Blanc, it's the Chardonnay. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
So I find that buttery. I get a lot of that buttery kind of element in that champagne because of the Chardonnay, and I think that's actually perfect for this kind of strength you can get from the Ramon Iones. So,
Mike?
Well, reminder, I'm drinking the Vouv 2015 and Trinidad La Trova, and like what a few other gentlemen said, my mindset was between this cigar and Oyo de Monterey Double Corona. I wanted something kind of in the middle, right? I wasn't going to grab a Partagas or anything stronger because of the champagne that we're enjoying, and it's going well. Jen joined me tonight, so we've got a nice shark board going, and everything is just kind of melding together wonderfully. And I think it works great, and I highly recommend it.
Excellent. Brett?
So I'm smoking a Siglo 5 and a 2008 Booth Clicquot Rosé, and the pairing is absolutely sensational. The cigar's got about 7 or 8 years of age, so it's mellowed a lot, and the kind of citrusy and mocha elements of the cigar are pairing really well with it's a rosé, but because it's got, it's 18 years old at this point, a lot of that more overt kind of red fruit has has turned into, I guess, what you'd say like stone fruit and stuff like that. And that combined with the mocha of the cigar and some of the citrus is absolutely sensational.
Chris.
To talk about my pairing tonight, I'd want to talk a little bit about recent experience with champagne in general, which was somewhat limited. But in August, I turned 50, and I took a couple of weeks to be on vacation. I was in Grand Cayman, and we were very active during the day, but it seemed like almost every night with the sunset, we had some Veuve Clicquot, and it was very bright, and it has sort of that green apple. And I also noticed sort of the more it was corked, it became even more complex. It moved past that brightness. It was a really nice flavors that I really appreciated. And often with some kind of cigar, a lot of Por Larinaga Petit Coronas on that steak, because they were smoking the best out of everything that I had. But and then so I wanted to try this Bollinger, and I have to say, and this is something maybe Ken could maybe expand on or not, but the Bollinger, it's really, so I really appreciated the Veuve, the other wine, of course, but this Bollinger this evening, immediately when I started to drink it, it seemed to have a lot more kind of a body to it, like a mouthfeel, almost like I'd say a beer or a regular glass of wine, but it's still light, and of course it's still there's a champagne, and the flavors are delicious. And I think it's interesting. It's almost making the this Bellicoso, this Romeo and Juliet Bellicoso, is really light. It's very sort of the lighter note of the two, but it's a nice contrast. But the champagne is delicious. I'm finding the Bollinger to be really tasty, and it's the first time I've had it. So
I just want to expand on that, Chris, because that Romeo and Juliet, which year is that, the Bellicoso that you're having?
You think I know, but I could say it's got at least 4 to 5 years of age on it, and
They're generally not the lightest of cigars. You put that straight in that medium-bodied category. I always have, and it's not a cigar many people smoke, which I was really intrigued when you said you had that cigar. I wanted to ask you what your thoughts were about it, and I'll do that a little bit later. But
yeah,
so I was interesting. But that leads to my next question for you, Kenny. So when we talk about cigars, and I'll say El Rey del Mundo is on that lightest scale of light medium, and then you go to Trinidad, which is, again, Trinidad is generally just below medium, medium below. Then you go to your fuller bodied cigars, which is your Partagas 898s or your H. Upmann Magnum 46s, which is your next level up. In terms of champagnes, and again, I'll refer back to NVs. Well, actually, no, yeah. So in terms of houses, which are the lighter bodies, which are the fuller bodies? Because I think that's something that most people wouldn't even know when they go into a store in terms of what they're buying. So where do they sit in terms of this?
What Chris was saying is really interesting, because Bollinger is one of those richer styles. And if you're talking a slightly richer cigar, then, yeah, that to me is going down the right track. The lighter houses are things like, you've got your Tattingers and so forth. Styles vary within houses, of course, but Tattinger's normally seen as a lighter, more ethereal style. Perrier-Jouet is something similar, those sort. Then you go, if you want your big, powerful stuff, Pol's up there, but probably Krug and Bollinger and others like that step over it. The interesting thing, someone mentioned slightly, Fuzz, you mentioned you're drinking slightly sweeter one. We forget that in the old days, champagne was sweet. It was really much, much sweeter than we have today, and it's slowly come down. And there's actually the 1874 Pommery. Pommery is also a lighter house, but the 1874 Pommery is considered by many to be the first drier champagne. And they literally wrote a song that was sung in music halls about this Pommery 1874. There are other earlier ones that may well have been dry as well, but that's the one that sort of, for whatever reason, became famous. But even so, I've no doubt that the 1874 Pommery would be seen as so sweet by us, but it was dry to what expectations were. The oldest champagne I've ever seen was an 1807 Moet. Now, and this was put on by a friend in Finland a couple of years ago, and he told me what he was serving, and so I knew, but everyone else at the tasting didn't. And so he asked, "Tell us what this is," and served it blind. Now, it was still in good condition, no fizz. You wouldn't expect fizz after all that time, but what you can sometimes get is you almost get a little prickle, because that's the CO2 that remains, but it's not enough to give you bubbles, but it's still just in there. But most people were going, "This is a lovely old Sauterne, this is a wonderful old Vouvray," because there was still this sweetness to it. So we are drinking much, much drier champagnes than we ever did before. And even over the last 2 decades, the trend has been the dosage, which is the level of sweetness that's left in the wine, was around your 9, 10, 12 grams per litre. Most houses are bringing that down now, and you're seeing 7, 8, maybe even lower than that. And of course, there are things they call the non-dosage, where there's no sweetness at all. That became very trendy for a while, but I don't think anyone really nailed it properly. You need a Roederer were pretty close with what they called the Philippe Starck. You needed a warm vintage and a warm site in Champagne, and you only got that every now and again. And that theirs wasn't bad, but I find those very quickly become hard. And people say, "Oh, well, they'll age." Good luck, not for me.
I'm with you on those, Ken.
Yeah.
But I actually have a kind of a related question. I think part of the reason dosage has been able to go down, we've had all these much warmer vintages, so potential
Absolutely.
alcohol is going up. So the question that I had written down at the beginning of this that I was curious is related to climate change. So one thing we're starting to see a little bit more are what are called Coteaux Champenois, which is basically still wine from Champagne. It's still extremely small quantities. And I can't see a day in our lifetimes where sparkling wine isn't the bedrock of Champagne. But I do have 2 questions. One is, do you think that, still wines in general from Champagne are going to become something that has a significance that people start to actually talk about, and that you can import for less than $300 a bottle or something like that? And then kind of more generally, how do you see climate change over the next 5, 10, 20 years impacting Champagne, both in the glass and just sort of in the region in general?
You realise if I answer this question that the American authorities are going to go through everything and say, "No, you're not allowed to come into our country." But look, the Coteaux Champagne, yeah, it's always been around, but it was a tiny little novelty. I think Laurent Perrier used to do one years ago, and you'd occasionally see it. Bollinger have done one, what they call I should know, Enfant something or other, and it's a Pinot, because there's both red and white. You can get red and white Coteaux Champagne. They've done, and it used to be a little sort of side thing that occasionally you'd find a bottle here and there, and they were pretty cheap. Now you buy a bottle of their Enfant, the Coteaux Champagne, you're paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars for it if you can get it. Louis Roederer had just brought it in recent years. I did an article on Quill and Padford on these styles, and it took me 2 or 3 years to get a couple of samples. It was so difficult to get samples from the wine companies because there was so little even coming. It's a niche curio. Fascinating. But you've got to remember, these guys now with these wines are going to be competing with Burgundy because they're situated very close. They're the same grape varieties, Pinot and Chardonnay. Are you going to pay the sort of money for these wines of a couple of $100 when you might be getting a much better Burgundy for less? But then I'll take that further. Why on earth are people paying for white Burgundy the prices that are charged today when Margaret River Chardonnay is just so good and so much cheaper? It's beyond me. I mean, a friend of mine is a doctor who holds a monthly, or every 6 weeks we have a lunch. He's been collecting, he's 10, 15 years older than I am, and his family's been collecting wine for 1,000,000 years, and he has a brilliant cellar. I took a Lewin, I think it was about an '05 or something like that, to one of his lunches. We serve all these blind. He was sitting there with the bottle at the end of the lunch, and I swear he had tears coming down his face. I'm not quite sure whether that was because he realised the fact that he had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on white Burgundy when he didn't need to, or whether it was just the quality of the wine, or maybe a bit of both. But yeah, this is becoming a factor around the world. If you want these Cotto champagnes, you're paying for them, and you're having to search hard for them as well. But then there's going to be wines like Margaret River and other places, and no doubt plenty in the States and other places where they're challenging white Burgundy. I mean, I got a note from one of the retailers, or at least importers that I occasionally buy from the other day, and he had a Saint Aubin, Aubin, how you pronounce the thing, Premier Cru, $1,800 a bottle. Now, when I first got interested, if it had been $18, you would have said this is a rip-off. It's now $1,800 a bottle. The prices in Burgundy have just gone insane. And unless you're a Russian oligarch, good luck. But that becomes I mean, we can sit here and talk quality all day, but prices are a factor. Just always going to be the reality of the world. If it's not, good luck to you. Buy whatever you can. But for the rest of us, you got to take it into account. Sorry, did that help?
Yeah, that was certainly interesting. And I guess just in general, if you have any thoughts about how climate change is going to affect champagne.
Look, as I said, when they first started with the non-vintages, and that's the reason they were blending vintages, because they only got three, if you were lucky, 4 good vintages in a decade. And so they had to use other material. They'd save some from the good years to put it in with the lesser years and so forth. That kept up for decades and decades and decades. And we'd see vintages, but we'd only see maybe 3 vintages a year from most houses. Now, a lot of them put out almost every year. And some of those, and that's a fascinating thing. You've got an '08. Now, to me, '08's the great vintage of this century. I think it's the best since '88. Others, I mean, I've got friends who rave about '03. Seriously, you wouldn't wash your dog in '03 champagne. But, you know, it's up to each person. People love it. People like 16. I think someone's got a 16. I can't understand that vintage. I have tried. I don't get it. It just does nothing for me at all. But there are plenty of people out there. A friend brought she brought the 16 Cristal to dinner last week before. And I thought, she writes for the Parker's Wine Advocate, so she's no fool. And she knows what she's talking about. She loves it. And I'm saying, well, I'll drink Cristal any day of the week, even this one.
It's better than 15, though, I think. I haven't had the Cristal, but I think the vintage in general. Just as another tip, if you can still find any, a kind of an unheralded vintage, in my opinion, has been 2013.
13, absolutely.
Lost after the very classic style, and I think that they're going to age beautifully.
13 is exactly what I was thinking of when you were talking. It's a cracking vintage. 14's pretty good. I prefer 15 to 16, but others don't. You're tossing coins almost. But it's interesting. These things change. The first time I ever went to Champagne, I did the Champagne competition in Australia, and so you get sent to for 2 weeks in Champagne, and that was the first time I'd ever been, and that was '93, and I was still, hardly out of school, but ish. Be nice or you don't get it. Anyway, and talking to a whole heap, because we're there for 2 weeks, and talking to all the producers that we met, and they had this trio of, and they just had never seen a trio of great vintages before, and they were so excited. So we had 88, 89, 90, and they ranked them. 88 was bottom, 89 was terrific, 90 was unbelievable. I came back a year or two later, and 88 had crept up and was edging ahead of 89, but 90 was still. A couple of years later, they were all talking 90 and 88 as 88 was the most deceptive, under the radar vintage, and it just kept getting better and better. And today, a lot depends on the individual bottle, the cork, how it's held up, and the storage especially. But 88 is still a glorious vintage. 90 is also a glorious vintage. 89's, you'd be pretty lucky to have too much worthwhile. So these things, 2000, for example, I dismissed 2000 when it came through. I wasn't that impressed. That was a mistake. 2000 is a really good vintage, and it's, again, one that's crept up. Maybe 16 will do that. I can't see how, but maybe it will. Now we've got 18, 19, 20, which are all considered another glorious trio. We're seeing 18s on the market. Some of the smaller places will be putting out 19s already, and you'll start to see 20s fairly shortly. But yeah, vintages, people argue about vintages endlessly. And they have, if you prefer 16, there's absolutely no reason not to drink it. If it suits you. And clearly, I may be shown to be completely wrong again.
I think it was 2007. PCC released the Ramon Iones Estupendo and the Punch Super Robusto in the same year as a regional. And the Estupendo Ramon Iones was such a superior cigar in that first 3 years. Now, if both came up, you would just jump on that Punch Super Robusto. For some reason, it just has exploded in terms of complexity, in terms of every other aspect. I'll ask you a question, Kenny. In terms of climate change,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we keep you.
No. I'll just go back to it, and it's not controversial. I'm just asking: is it actually a concern of winemakers in France, the champagne makers in France? Is it a concern?
Look, it's a concern for some, not others. You talk to winemakers in Germany; they love it. They think climate change is the best thing ever, because all of a sudden they're having good vintage after good vintage, as opposed to one or two a decade. In the colder areas, they think it's fantastic. But you look at other places. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe in 30 years, people will be growing Grenache in Champagne. It's certainly changing things, and they're doing everything they can to work on it. But sure, they can work in their own vineyards and they can trellis, they can prune, they can look after the soil in certain ways to try and mitigate the effects. But in the end, if the world doesn't sort out climate change, there's, it's fingers in the dam sort of stuff. It's going to get them. And so you look towards, do you make much more approachable, richer, more generous styles rather than the lean, elegant styles? And it's happening. They're sort of concerned, but they also know that, it's the reality of life. We've got to put up with it because politicians won't do anything, I meant.
So if you move away from champagne, and this is a segue question. Is there another region in the world that does, I know Spain does Cava, and you've got some brilliant sparklings. Are there any brilliant sparklings that really are taking it up to that Champagne region? Brilliant sparklings.
If you talk
just before Ken breaks in, just want to add to that question. Cremant, in regards to Champagne and Cremant being made the similar way as Champagne is, but it's outside of the Champagne region in France. How does that also compare to other sparklings and in different regions? Sorry, Rob.
Yeah, Cremant got all confusing in the Champagne region because Mumm had a vineyard in Cremant, and they made a Cremant style. So it was the Cremant de Cremant, which is a cracking wine, and it was much lower pressure. They still do it under another RSV something or other, but they could no longer call it what they could. Cremant, yeah, they're okay. I mean, Champagne, I think it's a generalisation, obviously, but it's a pretty strong one that the wines from Champagne are probably superior to what you're seeing from Cremant, which is out of the Loire Valley and so forth. It doesn't mean there aren't good wines. Around the world, I mean, if you listen to the English, they are banging on non-stop about how they are the new Champagne. The wines are glorious. This is fantastic. They make 2/3 of a puddle, and certainly some of the wines are very good. Long way to go before. I mean, they're getting publicity way out of whack with the production, and the wines are very good. I think that the next best region in the world is Tasmania. New Zealand do a couple of goodies. Marlborough actually does some pretty good sparklers, but the problem is, why on earth are you going to bother with sparkling wine in Marlborough when you've got to put it in your cellar for umpteen years before you can actually sell the thing? When if you put that vineyard to Sauv Blanc, you're selling it 6 weeks after you pull the grapes off the vines. The economics just don't work. But Tassie, for me, has done some brilliant stuff. The wines of Arras, Ed Carr, the winemaker, he's the only. I mean, if you Google him, he's the only winemaker outside Champagne to win, sparkling winemaker of the year several times, so forth. He's a genius.
So for those who do not know, because this will be recorded, Tasmania is a small island to the south of Australia, part of Australia, and with a unique climate. And Arras, Arras, is a house that you should actually pay some attention to in terms of their sparkling wines. Just absolutely astounding. I agree with you, Ken. I think they're, I've always got some here. I think they're just brilliant, and they don't miss a beat. But you believe they're the closest in terms of, when I say close, so. I don't think they try to copy. I think what they produce is brilliant. But just if you can find them in your neck of the woods, anywhere in the world, Arras wines.
They were part of Hardy's, which was one of our very large producers. And Ed was pinched from Penfolds to come across to make sparkling wine for them, but he never really got the support he needed. It's now been sold to another, I think, a gentleman out of Hong Kong, and he is providing them with the support they need. Now they have the funds to do what they want. Also, Ed always puts some wines aside, so you're seeing wines that have been on lees for 10, 12, 15 years. They're tiny production stuff, and they're very expensive, but they are extraordinarily good wines. But just the general Arras is a seriously good sparkling wine. Yeah, absolutely. But they've got to be because they're not the cheapest wines on the block either. So when you start being compared with a lot of the basic non-vintage wines, you've got to be that level. Otherwise, why are people going to buy them? It's all very well being patriotic to a degree, but you move on and you.
So I've got Spanish heritage. Do you rate Cava? Because I don't.
Again, look, there's some Cavas that are really good. There's plenty that isn't. Plenty of it's designed for, guzzle it next to the pool sort of stuff, which is fine. And if that's how it's priced, that's fine. But there are makers who are seriously working hard on making the best. They're a very different set of grapes, but the methods tend to be very similar. And there are some good carvers. Don't ask me.
Can you mention 2 or 3 great carvers?
The don't ask me bit was about to say don't ask me names because first of all, if I could remember them, I couldn't pronounce them.
Can help you there. But,
yes, I know. You are bilingual, English and shit.
I have a lowbrow question, but first I want to add, my wife is Spanish also, so and I'm Italian and Spanish, so I have I have this kindred thing with Rob. But But moving on, I was curious about this. My lowbrow question is, I noticed there's a different kind of headiness or a different kind of almost buzz from champagne, and it's easy to recover in the morning from champagne. I feel like is there anything to that, or is that just me? I just wanted to put that out there.
I think that there is something to that. I think, but I think it sort of tends to apply a bit across all wines. Quality wines, quality wine doesn't hurt you quite so much the next morning. Sure, if you drink a whole bucket load. On one of those trips to Champagne, a mate and I were basically given carte blanche on the wine list, and it was at the end of the trip, and we said, well, let's have a crack. And between us, we managed seven bottles, and we both woke up the next morning fresh as. Now, I don't think I could do that today, but these were quality champagnes, and we felt fine. And granted, we'd had several weeks serious practice. This was a tough off season, as it were, and so we were in form. But quality champagnes, quality wines in general will give you less of a problem the next day.
And I have a question that's a little bit more niche. I've been hearing about Champagne possibly changing the region, the borders of the region itself, for about 20 years, and it seems like it doesn't go anywhere. And I can imagine possible reasons why, like they don't want more champagne on the market or something like that, or they don't want more grapes. Have you heard anything about that in the past 2 or 3 years? What's going on there?
It's been going on for about 20 years, and they started this program of investigating. And at the time, there was no intention to sort of have it happen the next week. It was an incredibly in-depth study of all factors from economic and commercial, quality, climate, all sorts of things. Because the Champagne region, I think, is about 35,000 acres or hectares, sorry. And 30 years ago, there was still a fair bit unplanted. 15, 20 years ago, there was very little unplanted. The only stuff that's not planted are the roads, the schools, the houses, the villages. Everywhere else is just a carpet of vines. And so they did look at this, and they're still looking at it. And there are committees making decisions. And we do get occasional word coming down that there are a couple of areas that are to be incorporated, and there's less that will be unincorporated. The problem is, if you've got a vineyard in Champagne, if you've got an acre of champagne vines and you're on the edge of the boundary, the bloke across the road, his acre is worth of vines, which can't be called champagne, is worth about 10,000 euros. Your acre could be €1 million. So you really don't want to have the boundary come and cut you out. And so they scream blue murder if they think they're going out of it, and threaten lawsuits and all sorts of stuff. So that's why they've had this very long process. It will happen, but I think the changes are going to be fairly small.
So just out of interest sake, so 350 hectares, that's all the Champagne
35,000 hectares.
35,000 hectares, okay. 35,000 hectares.
Yes.
Which is not big.
No, it's not. It's not huge. Well, you make a lot of wine out of 35,000 hectares of grapes.
Yeah, they do make quite a lot. And a lot of champagne, you guys were talking about Cava not being good. A lot of champagne, if you have ever bought champagne in France, there's a lot of really cheap champagne that is not very good, to be honest with you. It's just in export markets like the US and stuff, I don't think we get any of it. It's just worth keeping in mind.
Just not, if they're selling it at €6 in a supermarket, what's the price when it gets to the States? And people are looking and thinking, here or anywhere else, why the hell would I be buying this rubbish? There's a lot of champagne that's lesser quality. They have their various levels, from the Grand Crus, the Premier Cru vineyards, and the ones below that. And so the top wines, the Prestige, is very often 100% Grand Cru, or will incorporate some of the better Premier Crus. Most of the stuff comes from either Premier or Grand Cru that goes into the brands we've been talking about. But there is some places they've identified decent vineyards that suit their style, so they are getting some of those. But in general, if you've got the bottom stuff, it's called an shell rating. If you're down the bottom, it's basically they set a price. So they say 10 kilos, that's 10 euros a kilo of grapes. If you've got Grand Cru, you get 10 euros a kilo. If Premier Cru runs, I think, from 90 to 99%. So if, for example, your Premier Cru vineyards are rated at 95%, you get 95% of that 10 euros. Now, they've seen what happened in places like Australia, where growers, makers like Penfolds and that, when they went to growers, they said, okay, we're no longer just going to pay you the same bog average amount we pay everyone else. You've got a really good vineyard, and so we want to help you look after these grapes, and we want to reduce yields. And they're going, but if you reduce yields, I don't get as much money. And they're going, well, we're going to pay you more for your kilo or your ton of grapes or whatever, and to make sure you get more than compensated. That way we get a smaller quantity of grapes, but a much higher quality. And so that's what goes into the Granges and the 707s and the 389, all of those sort of things. And the champagne makers have worked out that, if they can talk to growers and say, grow it the way we want and we'll guarantee you a higher price, they're happy. Because, I mean, you drive around the area of Champagne, you don't see anyone driving anything less than a brand new Merc or BMW or something. They make a lot of money, these growers. And they think, well, we just push out the volume, that's good for us. Now they're understanding that they can get the same money and provide quality. And Champagne's going to need that because, as we say, England, Tassie, Carver, all sorts of places around the world are making quality champagne, quality sparkling, and so they've got to stay ahead.
Ken, I'm curious though, but because Champagne is kind of weird. It's not like Burgundy where each individual vineyard is what's rated on, Grand Cru or Premier Cru. The whole town, I think, in Champagne is Grand Cru. And surely there are spots that are not good, that grow shitty wine. Pardon my French. But what do you think of, basically, how reliable of an indicator of quality are the actual crus in Champagne?
They're pretty good, but you're correct. Certainly, in the Grand Crus, there'd be patches that might not be of the quality. But in general, this came over. They worked it out basically by what people were paying for grapes in the old days, way back whenever. And there's always a degree of politics, etc. Yeah, Burgundy has the individual vineyards, which again have the Grand Cru, Premier Cru, etc. Also a degree of politics, etc. If anyone tells me Clos and Sharks or Parentou and so forth aren't deserving of Grand Cru, whereas you've got Clos and Corton that have some very good wines, but hell, in general, they'd be much better suited as Premier Cru. But so
I may have missed it. I may have missed it, Ken. But can you define Grand Cru, Premier Cru, etc.? I mean, how does the average punter out there actually understand those terminologies?
I don't know that they do, but the label, they'll say this is from Grand Cru.
Absolutely. How do they define that?
There's 17. I'm going off the top of my head here. I think it's 17 Grand Crus, and that may change with their revision of the whole thing. They may find areas that they can bump up or down, but I think it's 17 from memory. That's the villages, and so 10, 20, 30 growers could be within that village. And by growers, I also mean the big houses owning vineyards. Some own a lot of vineyards, some own very little. And they just buy. That's the Grand Crus. Premier Crus are the next. I don't know how many Premier Crus.
So I'm going to jump back here because I'm going to jump back. So who defines that?
CIVC originally did all of this sort of stuff. The committee intervention information champagne something or other. CIVC we call them.
Because the quality is so they say the quality is so good out of this region, of these 17.
They've done it years ago. It's not every year. It doesn't change. They did it years ago. So that's what's there. They did it years ago. God help them if they had to do it every year. Honestly, there'd be another.
So it's a cartel in effect.
I'm sorry, I've gone.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
I've got technical. I've got technical difficulties.
You write for one magazine. You can't say that.
I've got technical difficulties. I am not calling the CIVC a cartel. God help me.
Okay, so it's like the
Quite a
FIFA
litigious organization.
They are very litigious. They are very litigious. Incredibly litigious.
Okay, well, that was interesting to me because that's not actually something that's defined upon quality that's coming out. Something that's defined years and years ago in terms of that is the Grand Cru.
Yes. But the same thing happened in Bordeaux and in Burgundy years and years ago. I mean, Bordeaux was 1855, but it's a weird one because it originally started out just the 4 first growths. What's his name? Rothschild, Baron Rothschild. He fought for years to get Mouton elevated to first growth status, which he did with the 73 vintage. And so there's only been 1 or 2 changes to the 1855 classification. But if Mouton now buy a vineyard down the road, which is a 4th growth, if they own it, they can incorporate it into their first growth wines and call it first growth, which is just, I mean, and they rave on about terroir, etc. And I'm thinking, well, how the hell does that work?
So you are a magnificent wordsmith, and I'm just thinking about. No, I'm not taking the piss out of you, but you are. But I'm just thinking about this video is going to have a couple of thousand views, whatever it's going to be, but there are people who are out there who are saying we have no idea what first growth, second growth, third growth is, etc. There, if you could define it in a paragraph, what would it be?
Well, that's your first, second, third, fourth. You're talking Bordeaux. I'm assuming you're talking Grand Cru, Premier Cru for Champagne.
Yeah, the same way. So basically, to me, it sounds very much like English Premier League. Yeah, you have first division, second division, third division, fourth. Yeah,
there's no relegation.
There's no relegation. So once you're in that division, no matter what you do, you are always in that division. So
even Spurs would stay up in Champagne.
Even Hotspurs would stay up in Champagne. Geez, that's scary. So can you just give us a brief, not the history of it, but exactly, okay, so first growth, second growth, third growth. It is specifically designated.
That's not Champagne.
No, it's not Champagne. Champagne's Premier Cru, blah, blah, blah. But how does that work?
Well, in 1855 in Bordeaux, they did a classification. They've done quite a few classifications, but that's the one that has stuck. And bizarrely, it was done not so much on quality, but on price of wine, on what these wines were getting in the market. And those 4, Lafite, Margaux, Latour, Haut-Brion, those 4 were the ones getting the prices. And so they were designated firsts. Then there was a bunch of seconds, thirds, fourths, fifths, and then the also wannabes. And there's a lot of wannabes. And it was done on price. It's very, very rarely changed. Just 2 or 3 changes over the years. And one, I think, because Baron Rothschild was a mate of Giscard or whoever was Premier of France at the time and managed to sort of put us up, please. And so they changed it. Burgundy was set out by vineyard. Now, different people can own vines in the same vineyard, but so they went around and they worked out what the top Grand Crus were, Premier Crus, etc. So and they don't blend across, whereas in Champagne, Grand Cru, Premier Cru can all be blended together. Champagne is the ultimate blending area. Burgundy is not. You stick to your if you've got effectively, if you've got vines in Clos Veugeot, you're not blending them with something elsewhere on the hill that doesn't have anything like that. You stick to, and it comes out as fatally Clos Veugeot, for example. Champagne, it goes back a bit to the riots of 1911 because a lot of places were bringing in grapes from outside the region, and the growers got very shitty about this because the locals were not getting the money they wanted, and outside this was, and so they actually tore down a few of the houses. And there's famous talk about a bunch of rioters going past one house, might have been Pole or Bollinger, I forget which, and they stopped and they said, no, these guys don't buy outside, don't burn them down, and went on to the next one and burnt them down. And so when the Rhone was the first area that brought in what they call the AOC, the Appellation Control, where they set up these districts. Champagne wasn't far behind, and so they set up the various Grand Crus, Premier Crus, but there they do blend across. And also, even though Grand Cru is seen as the best, there are plenty of wines that are outside. Philippines Clos de Guas, it's a Premier Cru, but it's considered one of the all-time great champagnes. So it's not quite as strict in that sense. But if you're looking at a bottle and it says Grand Cru, you can't. If you blend across, you can't put sort of call it Grand Cru if you've got any Premier Cru included. Similarly, Premier Cru, you can't have anything from below. But most of them don't put that sort of stuff on the label. They might, in their information, they'll say this comes from 16 different Grand Cru vineyards and 12 Premier Cru vineyards. That might be on the back label sort of stuff or in the information, but they don't put it on the actual main label. And so they believe you should rely on them. And for many years, they gave no information. I mean, they were honestly, American Secret Service could take a lesson from these guys. They kept secrets far better. No one knew what was going on, and you couldn't. And it was like I still remember going to a press conference in Havana on one of our trips when they were talking about the current harvest, and someone got up and said, because they said, we are now in the era of transparency. We will answer any question you like to ask us honestly. This bloke got up and said, can you tell us what production from this latest harvest? Yes, sir, we are happy. We are transparent. We will happily tell you the answer. We have more tobacco than last year, but not as much as next year, which, good luck. Let's hope there's no cyclones or anything. And they remind me so much of the Champenois, the Havana and Champagne. They are so, and because of the blending as well, there's so many comparisons there. And that's why I've told Hamlet, for God's sakes, next time you're in France, go and talk to some of these winemakers, because you will find such, aside from the fact that they'd love his cigars, that they find so many comparisons that they never expected, I'm sure.
I can add to what you have to say, Ken. I was at the Reims and Epinay, those two cities.
France,
yeah, in French. Last year, and I did a few tours of the champagne houses, and one of them showed a map of the Premier Cru and Grand Cru, and it was interesting. They were telling us that they get certain grapes from this area that was south of Epinay, even though they were Reims, quite far away, and they used that to put into their champagne. I was surprised that they were giving that information. Maybe it's available on the internet these days. But you're right. They have very strict traditions about the way that they make the champagne and what type of grapes go in to their champagnes.
They've changed a lot in the last 10 years or so, John, largely because so many people writing about champagne kept hammering them for information, and I'm sure customers as well. And so, things like disgorgement dates, they would never tell you that. But that's relevant. If you buy, for example, a bottle of non-vintage Bollinger that's disgorged 6 months ago or disgorged 10 years ago, they're going to be very different because it does, the aging does make a difference. And they're now starting to understand that people want it. It's not necessarily giving away the secrets to the kingdom, that people are actually interested and want to know and want to learn. And so some of the Jarkison that I mentioned earlier, they twigged to this. A couple of brothers, they twigged very early, and some of the others, and that's why a place like Krug, which would never have told you, seriously, just leave it to us. Now they're quite happy to give you a lot of information that you never saw before.
I have a question, because one thing I've noticed is that Dom has stopped putting the disgorgement dates on. They used to put disgorgement dates on, maybe it was probably more than 10 years ago now, and now they don't anymore. Have you heard anything about why they would do that?
No, I didn't realise that, to be honest. I've had a fair bit of Dom lately. but I really didn't examine the bottles as closely as I perhaps should have.
None of the bottles I have now from 2008 onwards have disgorgement dates on them.
We had a 2008 the other day, which was just spectacular, absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, it's a very good vintage for Dom.
I've got one in the wine fridge. I'm actually curious. I'm going to just pop over, take a look. Give me a minute.
There we go.
Can I have a question for our American viewers? As I was saying before, rosé's a lot bigger market in the US. Again, on this trip that I was there 5 months ago, they were talking about the two methods for making rosé. Leave the skins on a bit longer, number one. Number two, add a little bit of red wine. Most of them were favoring the add a little bit of red wine.
Yes.
In my personal journey, I learned that Bill Carsamon was the big one of rosé. My personal journey, I prefer other ones like Laurent Perrier rosé, or even Taittinger, or the Sydney boys, our friends, we like Philippina rosé too.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a rosé that you like? Champagne.
It's interesting. Years ago, Billy Cart was the rosé, and a few others. Laurent Perrier said that they had rosé, but it was a tiny percentage of the market there, and it was there was a famous statement. I think it was by the one of the people at Paul Roger, that I think it was the Christian's father, and he said, "While I am alive, this house will not make rosé. That is not champagne." Until he fell off the perch, they didn't make one. When I first got interested in wine in general, so we're talking very late 70s, early 80s, and I was just a complete novice at that. But one of the interesting things was, at that time, Australia was the largest drinker of our percentage of vintage champagne was higher than anywhere else in the world. Recently, we are now pretty much one of the highest in non-vintage. We've swung around, and a lot of that's because a lot more stuff's been brought in from a lot of the other growers, etc., to sell. In those days, champagne was a small market that you were selling to the aficionados mostly, but now non-vintage has just overtaken it. Rosé has gone from just a little curio of a couple of percent. It's probably now, I'm guessing, 10, maybe even 12% production in the region, and we see quite a bit of it. Look, there's some wonderful Belle Epoque rosé, the Krug rosé, Dom rosé. One of the greatest champagnes I ever had was the P3 Dom Perignon rosé from 1988 in Magnum. And that was, you could take me, if God had come down and said, "You're with me," I'd have said, "Now's the time." It was that good.
That Belle Epoque, is that the Perrier-Jouet Belle Epoque?
Perrier-Jouet Prestige. They had the standard, I think the first one was 64 from memory. And then they also started with rosé, which is a much smaller percentage of what they make. And they've also added now the Perrier-Jouet Blanc de Blanc, Belle Epoque Blanc de Blanc, which is a absolute wafer thin percentage, but by God, that's a good wine. Oh,
it is.
I'll put a plug in for Cristal Rosé.
Oh.
It's much more expensive than the Blanc Rosé, and the Blanc Cristal rather. It's not necessarily. I think one thing that you'll probably hear, and I'm curious what you think, Ken. Rosé is typically, especially in the prestige cuvées, much more expensive than the Blanc, but in my experience, it's not necessarily any better. It's just different.
And rarer, so of course price comes up. And I haven't for a while, but I used to do a presentation for the local casino every year for Rotorua, largely because they didn't want to spend the money on sending someone up from Adelaide to present. It was cheaper just to pay me. And we'd do a couple of sessions with the high rollers. And I can remember doing one. So they had a series of wine. And what got me was they had wines I had never seen before as door prizes and things for these high rollers. Bottles that are worth 20 grand that were, given to people. And some of these people were sort of 20-year-old kids down from Hong Kong or China or wherever who really wouldn't have known champagne from mud, but they're winning 20 grand bottles of champagne, nearly wept. But so I did the first one, and we went through the range. And for these guys, of course, it includes Cristal and Cristal.
They probably mixed it with Red Bull
and ice, and you wanted to weep. But and I said to them after, I said, I don't think that went very well. That table over there, they just talked amongst themselves. They didn't take any notice. And she looked at me. She said, "Well, they don't speak English." Fair enough. Okay, that might explain it. And then they emptied them out, and then second batch of people all came in. And I just said to the woman, I said, "Listen, you don't need to serve me all these wines again. I've tasted them all the first time. Just bring me a bottle of Cristal Rosé." "Yes, sir, not a problem." So they basically, I just sat there and talked to them something similar to this for the rest of the night and drank my bottle of Cristal Rosé.
Quick question.
Yep.
Went to BWS yesterday, and
You're allowed back in.
Yeah. There's a $35 bottle of champagne. So I've tried them before. I think you see a lot of these bottles in BWS or Choice Plus or whatever it is there, which are now sub $40. So for Americans out there, so we're talking about something that's about $22 a bottle, 22 US a bottle, champagnes. And everyone I've tried has always been disappointing. But they're out there, and they're mass market, and they're out there. Do you try those? Do you actually ever review those?
I get sent some of that sort of stuff now and then, and so I do review them.
So what's your thoughts?
Well, what we're seeing there is the stuff, the buyer's own brand equivalent and the supermarket wines in France, and people are picking them up and sending them out here, and by the €6 at the supermarket, by the time they get here, they're $35-40 a bottle, and they're the very bottom of the range. And people are buying them because they want the name champagne. They don't really care what it tastes like. They're going to be guzzling it at a wedding or round the pool with their mates, and they just want to be serving champagne, and that's fine. But you're not looking. Have
you tasted one that's actually good, like really good?
Oh, really good is of that sort of level. You're not expecting really good, and some are surprisingly drinkable. But this is where, in Australia, why the hell wouldn't you be drinking some of the good local sparklings? If you're in America, why the hell wouldn't you be drinking some of the good local sparklings? Because they're going to be better value. But they don't have the name champagne and the cachet that comes with that. Out at when they finished riding down at Logan, if they then want to have their mates round for a barbecue and pour champagne, they really don't care what it's like. No disrespect to Logan, who's
Logan is Hialeah or Compton. So just put in perspective for people out there who don't know what Logan is.
Produce a lot of very good footballers, they don't. And no disrespect to them, and who cares if they're happy and they've impressed their neighbours. Good for them.
So you've never had a good one that you'd recommend?
Well, wouldn't say that I've never had one that I wouldn't recommend, because if you're looking at the price and you're thinking, okay, this is actually a thoroughly drinkable
champagne, $22 a bottle, a $22 bottle, a US dollar bottle of champagne.
You'd say, hey, it's perfectly drinkable. You wouldn't say, buy this instead of anything else. But if you're wanting that sort of stuff, this is the one to buy, that sort of stuff.
So, Charles, what did you pay for your Piper Hosley?
I was going to give it a review in a little bit, but that was $65 pre-tax.
Wow, that's not cheap.
But Piper's
the T word,
another house, Rob. Piper's another house that has improved a great deal in recent years.
True, but I can buy a bottle of Piper here for 65 Aussie. I don't have to pay 65 US for a bottle of Piper. Yeah.
What are your tariffs?
Wow. Yeah.
We have a big market of champagne in Australia. We're like the 6th or 7th in the world, like 8 million, 9 million annually out of a population of 26 million. I think the margins are different. That's why the price of Australian champagne.
Okay, but let's go. So a couple of guys are drinking Verve. Well, they know what Verve costs in their markets. So a bottle of Verve here, we can walk out of the bottle shop in Aussie for a bottle of Verve, $72, $75 for a bottle of Verve. Yeah.
That's about what it is here in
That
US.
equates that equates to 55 US. Yeah. That equates
That's about
to
$80 here, Rob.
Yeah.
About $80.
Non-vintage Vouv,
No,
57.
no, what? It's $72 US here. That's what I'm saying. It's about the same price
Oh,
US,
it's
at
more
least in
expensive
Pennsylvania.
than Verve. Yeah, not
Yeah.
vintage.
California,
Yeah.
57.
My non-vintage Verve was about 55, actually.
Oh wow, that's a much better price than we get in
Yeah,
Pennsylvania.
That's what we get out here too.
But you guys have got your 50 markets. That's the difference.
Yeah.
We're one market. You're 50 markets, and different places put on different taxing and
We have a
systems.
state monopoly over alcohol here, or
Yeah.
over wine and liquor, I should say. Yeah.
I have another kind of basic question, but I've always heard many years ago, someone told me, Prosecco has to come from a certain region in Italy, and Champagne, as you said earlier, comes from a certain region in France. But yet I see California Champagne or Napa Champagne. And is there, what are the rules around that? Because I thought I once heard that no one's allowed to declare champagne unless it comes from the French region. But I've seen other sort of loopholes or something. Do you know anything about that, Ken?
Yeah, there's a lot on. Champagne fought we used to call anything sparkling champagne. We then had various trade agreements with France, which allowed us to export certain products to Europe. And in exchange, we became so much stricter on our geographical indicator regions and our names, because we used to call things claret and Hermitage and so on, and Burgundy. There's a great story about a wine that was entered into some show years ago that won both the Burgundy and the claret class, even though they're supposed to be totally different. Wines would be whacked with whatever name they wanted, but that all had to stop, and our laws put that in place. America's proved a little more difficult. There are agreements. Some of the companies that have been producing for Corbel, I think, is one, for example, that had sparkling wines that they call champagne for a very long time. Those things, some of those got grandfathered in, but in general, they're trying very hard to prevent that. And that's, as you say, they are litigious about this, but there's only certain things, there's some things you can't win, but they're trying to do that. Prosecco is a different kettle of fish, and an interesting one, because basically Prosecco is a grape, whereas champagne is not a grape. And so when Italian farmers, particularly in the King Valley here, were growing Prosecco and making local King Valley Prosecco and suddenly doing it very well and getting a good market for it, the Italians went ballistic and said, "No, you can't use Prosecco, it's ours. And they go, "It's a grape, we can use it." So there was a lot of fighting about this, and the Italians came out and said, the name of the grape is now Glera. I mean, seriously, get a worse name. So they've called it Glera. And so they're saying Prosecco is now the region, and therefore you can't use Prosecco. We're saying, well, we were in before that, and we will. It's being prevented being exported to Europe, but there are trade talks. A lot of thought that our spineless politicians will throw the Prosecco producers under a bus to get something else that they want, cheeses and things and meat and stuff. So there's a bit of a trade-off, and the poor old Prosecco producers look like they're going to get kicked in the arse. But to me, an Australian Prosecco, it's made from the grape. And again, Prosecco, look, there are, again, a couple of goodies, but it's it's not my favourite.
There's some great Proseccos.
And they're much cheaper.
Italian Proseccos are some superb Italian Proseccos.
There are some good ones.
There actually is in Italy, because my family's from there, near Trieste. There's a town called Prosecco. Has nothing to do with the sparkling though, but they're trying to get in on it in some way. But yeah, there are some great Proseccos. But talking to my family in Italy last year, they said you wash your feet with it.
Yeah.
and they tend to opt for a lot of the Italian method, classical method French style, which I had in Italy, and fantastic stuff as well.
There are some good
So
ones for
it's
sure.
quite interesting.
I
Just
visited
add-
the region. Sorry, just very
No,
quickly.
no, go ahead, Ken.
I went to Vinexpo quite a few years ago, and we spent a day going up into the Prosecco region because it was Festival of the Harvest or whatever they call it. And so they were blessing vineyards left, right, and crooked. And so we went to all these little towns. I got dragged into one church and we did the ceremony, and I got dragged into another church. I thought, bugger this. So I went outside, grabbed a cigar, and sat in the village square while they had their religious ceremony to bless the vineyards. And the next thing, out comes this young Italian priest. And he comes over and sits down next to me, and he said, you're from Australia. I said, yeah, I'm from Australia, etc. You must get me a visa. I think, beg your pardon? I must come to Australia. I must move to Australia and work in churches in Australia. You can organise that for me? And I said, well, not really. No, I don't really have a lot of say in that. You are an Australian priest. You must be able to do this. And I go, I'm not a priest. Seriously, who mistakes me for a priest? Anyway, and so
before we go any further, do you want to go through the story where you actually donned a priest's uniform to hitchhike from Brisbane to fucking Melbourne? Because everyone pulls over for a priest. So when you hitchhiked, you actually wore a uniform.
It's a long time ago.
For the
It's a long time ago.
No wonder that priest was so confused.
Is that a true story, Ken? Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is.
You actually, it is a
actually
true
a lot-
story.
Even field day.
Where did you get the outfit, Ken? That's what I want to
You
like a
buy 'em.
Halloween store or
No, you can buy them.
Have you ever seen
sell priest gear?
Have you
I
ever
bought
seen
them.
so you
Father Ted?
thought you actually thought this out ahead of time. This wasn't like a spur of the moment thing.
Mates and I used to do a bit of hitching in those days, and it was so hard to get anyone to stop for us. And I said, only way they're going to stop for us is if they think we're a priest. So I went and bought the gear. And tell you what, they pull over like an absolute flash. And a mate and I travelled by train down to, back when we were students, it was cheaper to travel by train to Melbourne. It was an overnight sort of, 20-hour trip down to Melbourne. And halfway through the night, I got changed into the priest gear. And we'd been sitting around these, there was a bunch of girls that were guzzling rum and so forth. Well, I tell you what, when they woke up the next morning and saw they were sitting next to a priest, the behaviour changed like you wouldn't believe. The problem was everyone wants to talk to you and they want to tell you their problems and they want you to solve them. And I had this guy going, this guy literally sat me down and said, you must tell me my path. Should I be a weatherman or a firefighter? Seriously? Well, weatherman, no one likes weathermen. Be a firefighter. I mean, so, it was bizarre. But the worst, the Australians will know Lygon Street. Now, when I was a young student, I didn't know Lygon Street from it. All I knew was a street in Melbourne with a lot of restaurants. And there was a bunch of us heading off to dinner. We'd been down for a ball, and so there's about 15, 20 of us, and we were all heading off. And I said, where the
He's in his priest outfit. He's in his priest outfit. Keep going.
I put the priest gear on to go down. Now, turns out Lygon Street is pretty much outside of the Vatican, the most Catholic place on the planet. And I didn't know this. And we're walking along, and I had a couple of the girls, and I got one an arm with each of them. And a mate goes into one of the restaurants, says, can we get a booking for 15? And the restaurant, no, we're booked. Go away. And then I hadn't heard this at this stage. Walk in. And I've got these two girls, and the owner looks, and he says, is he with you? And my mate goes, yes, he's with us. Of course you can have a table. So next thing you know, he's moving people in the restaurant to other tables, shuffling them around. And he comes and sits down, and I'm thinking, this is not going well. This has a bad feeling about it. Now he comes over and he says, Father, would you bless my restaurant? I tell you what, honestly, if you've ever had a sphincter close, I had no idea what I was going to say. And I'm sitting there thinking, and the whole restaurant's waiting for me to get up and bless the restaurant. I don't even know how to do this freaking thing. I'm in real trouble. And I got up and I had a brainwave. This is one of my proudest moments. I was a big Dylan fan. May God bless and keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and let others do for you. May you climb a ladder to the stars and climb on every rung, and may you stay forever young, which is Dylan's Forever Young. It's the only thing I could think of that had anything religious about it. He's kissing me and hugging me and carrying on. I'm thinking, Christ, thank God he's not a freaking Dylan fan or I'd be dead. And so they looked after us all night. It was brilliant. But sorry, I got sidetracked somewhere along this. Oh, the
Pretty good
priest in
story.
the priest in Italy then says,
For the
you
record, you're
must,
going straight to hell. Okay, go on.
he says, you must get me to Australia because I hunt. And I'm thinking, oh, that's what we need is an Italian priest who hunts. I will bring my own guns. Yes, that's a good idea because customs is going to be delighted when you turn up with a sack full of guns. And he said, I will shoot your emus and your kangaroos and your other things. I will shoot them all. And I'm thinking, well, why the freaking hell would we let you in? Yeah. Prosecco is the strangest region I have ever been to. And that was about the sanest thing that happened in the whole place. But anyway, sorry, that's a diversion.
Ken, just want to touch back on one thing you were saying about the Pommery 1874.
Yep.
I understand that Pommery actually in 2024 they released a new Appanage 1874
in honor of that wine.
In honor of that wine, and it's actually drier than the standard Appanage, oddly enough.
Because the concept of the 1874 being the first ever. And they exported the reason it became quite famous was it was one they exported to London, and the people in London had never seen a drier champagne, and they loved it, and that's why it got the song written about it and all this acclaim.
Yeah.
You can Google the song; you can find the song about it.
Yeah, I just have one question. I know that several of us have been drinking these champagnes. I'm using a flute myself, and I know that several others have been using a tulip style glass. What are what are your preferences, and what are the differences between the standard flute, the tulip, and of course, the old-fashioned coupe style glass?
The old-fashioned coupe was allegedly modelled on Marie Antoinette's breast. And when I first got interested in champagne, I'd read about this, and I'm thinking, and I knew flutes, and I'm reading about Marie Antoinette's breast. A flute? Seriously? What did the woman look like? I'm thinking, that's just the weirdest breast I've ever seen. But yeah, they're useless. They're utterly useless. Prawn cocktails. Flutes then became the thing because the concept was it keeps the bubbles narrow and allows it to come up the side. In fact, one of the, I think it was Riedel, they actually employed a woman because if you have a perfect surface, sorry, drop the cigar. Bloody thing. I'll get back to that. Sorry, I'm back. The bubbles come because the CO2 attaches itself to imperfections in the glass. So if you have a perfect glass, you don't get bubbles because it's got nothing to attach itself. The CO2 remains in the wine itself. And so they would actually employ a woman to put a little tiny cross at the bottom of the flute, scratch it in, and that's how it got its bubbles. But it's considered now, most champagne producers, they've long given up flutes. This is a tulip, and it's probably, for some places, it's too narrow. They prefer a normal white wine glass, and that's definitely the trend because that allows the aromas a chance to do as white wine does. You can get the advantage of what's in the aromas. Move away from your flutes, move to tulips or white wine glasses.
It's interesting you say that because I know that I remember reading that the German champagne competition they actually still recommend using flutes as opposed to the tulip style glass.
Well, that's because they don't want you to taste it.
Rightio. And so I mean, your preference would be the tulip, obviously,
tulip or white wine,
or a white wine glass. So so a larger bowl, narrowing to a smaller rim to allow that concentration.
Not too large, but certainly, white wine or tulip.
And what about your preferred temperature of drinking champagne. I mean, I know that some people would leave the bottle in the fridge for a couple of days and take it out and then would serve it immediately. Other people would just basically leave it in for half an hour or whatever. What would be the preferred temperature for champagne?
I mean, if it's in the fridge, once it gets to a certain temperature, an extra few days is not going to change that temperature. So I don't see how that matters. Look, if I wasn't quite so lazy, I'd probably be putting this bottle back in and going and getting it. But that would involve getting up and walking to the fridge. So there are certain things on a Sunday morning, please. So you don't want it too cold because that whether it's white wine or champagne or whatever, if it's too cold, it dulls the aromas. But then you don't want it too warm because it gets broad and so forth. So, out of the fridge for a little bit is fine.
So basically, keeping it in a chilled wine bucket or maybe with a one of those frozen sleeves over it, just to leave it there, just keep it cold while you're serving it and over time.
Listen, you can get very precious about things like champagne and other wines and that, and thereabouts is probably going to be fine for most stuff. I mean, people get extraordinary precious, particularly about champagne. Is one of my favourite stories is if you go back to Livingston, 3 years missing in the wilds of Africa, and the newspapers sent Henry Morton Stanley to find him, and he did this year-long trip tracking him down, and he marched from, I think it was Zanzibar or wherever, across to Lake Tanganyika to find him. Now, and the story of that is everything was on the backs of donkeys, etc. They went through deserts, they went over mountains, they went through rivers, they went through wars. They had half their porters bugger off. They bounced this stuff around. When he found Livingston, every school child in the world knows Dr. Livingston, I presume. Do you know what was said next? Would you like a glass of champagne? And he's pulled out a bottle of what was known as Sillery at the time. Sillery is actually one of the Grand Cru vineyards. These days, you're not allowed to put those sort of names on the actual bottle, but he pulled it out, and they talk about the glorious foaming elixir that they then enjoyed. Now, to be honest, if you've been stuck out in the middle of Africa for 3 years, I don't care what it tastes like, what it really tastes like, you're going to think it's glorious. So it perhaps wasn't as good as they described it, but they talked about how wonderful it was.
Reminds me of a story from Mark Twain where he mentions not smoking for Mark Twain smoked a lot of cigars, obviously. He mentions not smoking for 3 months, and he saw someone buy a cheap cigar, start smoking it, and throw it onto the ground because it was so gross. And he picked it up off the ground and started smoking it and said he realized it was the best cigar he'd ever smoked. And the fool who'd thrown it away would have realized it too if he'd been without a smoke as long as I had.
Yeah, I'm sure that sort of stuff's true. Absolutely.
Kenny, one question I have, probably one of the last questions we'll do because we need to wrap it up. But I've got a question here from one of our forum members. He goes, bubbles and cigars. Is bubbles and cigars any link to quality in terms of a bottle of champagne? Sorry, bubbles and champagne, not bubbles and cigars. Bubbles and champagne. Is there any link to quality?
Yeah, there is to a degree. They always talked about the finer the bubble, the better the champagne. To a degree, if you've got big bubbles, they almost certainly will come from the Charmat method or the Prosecco method or something like that. Whereas good champagne will have very fine bubbles, but there's slight degrees in that. And as I said before, it comes from the imperfections on the glass. The carbon dioxide attaches itself and up it comes. So I think that is definitely true to a degree. You don't want big fat bird's eye bubbles. You want fine bubbles. But look, if you've got a good champagne, I wouldn't be worrying about millimeters of bubbles, etc.
Guys, are we right to wrap this up? Is there any last questions you may have for Kenny on this? Good. Can I tell you, Kenny, that was just when it comes to masterclasses, that was a masterclass in terms of
It's fun.
champagne.
It's
Thank
really
you so
was.
much, Ken.
Oh, anytime.
It was, just brilliant. And I love doing these non-scheduled, non-structured runs.
Non-scheduled. I've been lined up for this for months.
Because you cancel 4 times. But outside of that, brilliant, Kenny. I mean, and people say you have no skills, but I just wanted to showcase your skills in front of the populace out there. Brilliant, brilliant. Kenny, thank you so much. Always appreciate it. And I'm not a complete tosser, but I do have my Ayala champagne bucket, ice bucket, which is great. To all of
And you
FOH,
think that means you're not a tosser?
Yeah, no, I know I'm a tosser, complete. But for all those guys out there and girls who watch this, and this is a 2-hour episode, so you'll break it up over the next couple of weeks, whatever it is there, where you're at your gym sessions or whatever you're doing. We'll do a lot more of these in the months to come. I'm hoping, Ken. I'm hoping. But let's go into. I'd love to go into the world of Bordeaux. I'd love to go into the world of Bordeaux. And I think that would be a great episode for us to go into next. And brilliant. Honestly,
I just serve it the pleasure.
Enjoy these so much because I learned so much. And I know you guys learned so much. Until next
That was
time,
good fun.
again, thank you.
Bravo, Ken.
Thank you very much, Ken.
It's a pleasure. Anytime. And if anyone thinks of any questions, feel free to shoot them through.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Ken.
PM. Just PM Ken because he'll get back to you. Well, never.
Yeah, that's
We'll be back.
next
We'll be
time we
back to
can.
you. We look forward to it, and we'll do another episode soon. Take care.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.